Why can't I start, even when I care so much? You keep telling yourself you'll start when it feels right, when the desk is clean, when the timing's better, when you're finally ready. But it's been weeks, and somehow, everything's still waiting. You scroll past the same productivity hacks, reread the same headline, just start. But something in your chest tightens, like starting would make it real. What if you try, and you're not who you hoped you were? What if this version, the one you've been protecting, only works when it stays imagined? Because the moment you begin, you might prove the thing you've spent years trying not to know. That maybe you're not stuck, maybe you're just afraid to find out. And so you wait, again, convincing yourself it's not time, when really, you just can't bear to watch the illusion fall apart. You say you're just tired, that you need 5 more minutes, that it's not the right day, not the right energy. And somewhere in all that, you start to believe it. Because if you don't believe it, you'd have to admit you're not avoiding the work. You're avoiding what it might prove. You tell yourself you're building up to it, that the pressure helps, that deadlines focus you. But the truth is, you only let yourself act when failure no longer has time to breathe. Because if you give it space, if you start early, if you start calmly, then the result is yours. And if it's not good enough, then maybe you're not. So instead, you let the moment shrink. You let time run the edges dull. Until the only thing sharper than your guilt is your excuse. And it's not just work, it's everything. You hesitate before texting back because what if it sounds wrong? You write the message, then delete it, then rewrite, then scroll away like it never mattered. But it does. Because every small thing feels like a test you didn't agree to. Every action is proof. And every inaction is a fragile kind of safety. You wouldn't call it fear. You wouldn't call it shame. You just call it not yet. But the gap between not yet and never is thinner than it looks. And here's the part that still stings. You used to be the one who finished early, who stayed up late because you were inspired, who filled notebooks before the deadline even existed. Now you can barely open a new file without checking the clock, without opening another tab, without wondering if you even know how to do it anymore. You convince yourself you just need one more tool, one more idea, one more bit of motivation. But it's not missing pieces that are holding you back. It's the weight of the picture in your head. The perfect version. The version where it flows, where it lands, where you're enough because you made it look effortless. That version haunts you, because anything you actually make will always fall short of that. So you wait. So you overthink. So you stay in the middle, not failing, but not free. You probably know this feeling, even if you've never said it. That numbness before the start. Like standing in front of something you asked for but can't touch. You rehearse the same plan every night. Tomorrow I'll wake up early. I'll focus. I'll finally begin. You even feel it for a second. That flicker of, this time will be different. And then, nothing. You wake up, and the weight is still there. So you scroll, so you clean, so you convince yourself it wasn't the right kind of morning. And slowly, your energy dies in the spaces between decisions you didn't make. But here's what no one sees. This isn't laziness. This isn't apathy. This is erosion. You are thinking constantly, but acting never. And the loop doesn't ask your permission anymore. You say you'll break the pattern, but even that becomes another plan you don't trust yourself to follow through on. Every sentence starts as a solution and ends in another question. How did it get like this? How did the thing you love start feeling like the thing you're avoiding? You remember the version of you who didn't wait to be perfect, the version who just started, who made things without second-guessing every move. And some nights, you wonder if that version is still in there, or if you buried them under all the pressure of what they could have been. You told yourself you had potential. You believed it. Everyone else did too. But now, potential feels like a curse, because the more you wait, the bigger it gets, and the harder it becomes to face the truth. What if it's not real? What if you were only ever good because you never gave anyone a chance to see the full picture? What if trying, really trying, would ruin the story you built around who you might be? So you stay in the loop. You plan instead of doing. You dream instead of finishing. You rewrite the same sentence 20 times, so you never have to find out what comes next, and you tell yourself that you're pacing, that the pause is part of the process, But deep down, you know it's not about the pause. It's about protection. Because nothing feels safer than something that never had a chance to fail. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how good you got at calling that safety, at calling it rest, calling it intention, calling it strategy. You weren't avoiding the thing, you were protecting yourself from what it might mean. And this is where something quietly broke. You started to believe it was just your rhythm, that the slow starts, the missed chances, they were just part of how you worked, your process. But underneath that, something else was forming. Not doubt, not even fear. It was silence. A silence that started filling in for confidence. A silence that answered before you ever did. You don't trust your own momentum anymore. You don't trust that if you begin, you'll stay with it. You've seen the pattern too many times. The plan, the excitement, the slow fade, the guilt, the loop. You don't even get mad at yourself now. You just shrink. A little smaller each time. Right here is where you got used to disappearing. Where you stopped arguing with the voice that said, if you were really capable, you wouldn't keep stalling. Where you let the loop feel like you. And the fatigue, it's not just from thinking too much. It's from hiding the fact that you are thinking too much, but still doing nothing. You carry that in your body, in the way you freeze when the page loads, in the way you say, I'll do it later, like it's not another quiet apology you'll have to make to yourself tomorrow. And this is the fracture nobody sees. You want to be seen as someone with potential, but you're terrified of being seen as someone who tried and didn't measure up. So you hide inside delay, inside overthinking, inside almost starting. And every time, it gets a little harder to believe that you're still capable, that you're not just an echo of someone who used to be. What if the thing you're protecting isn't your dream, but your image of the person who might have pulled it off? What if every delay is grief? Not just for what didn't happen, but for the version of you that might not exist anymore. This is when the silence started to scream. Not out loud, just inside. In the gaps between your thoughts. In the scrolling. In the 5 hours that vanish without memory. In the numb ache behind your eyes when you say, I just didn't have the energy. You tell yourself that maybe you'll figure it out later. But how many laters have you already used up? How many times have you said next week just to keep the fantasy alive a little longer? What if the thing you're best at is stalling the moment you have to find out who you really are? Because maybe if you start and it's not good, then you lose everything. But if you don't start, you still get to believe. You still get to say, I could have. You still get to live in the soft lie that one day, you will. What do you do when hope becomes a story you tell yourself to delay the ending? When the blank page becomes safer than anything you could ever write on it? What happens to a person who keeps waiting for the perfect moment and doesn't realize the waiting is the thing that's breaking them? You used to call it ambition. Now it just feels like a ghost you follow around. It used to push you. Now it watches you. Every time you stop halfway. Every time you lie and say, it's almost done when you haven't even started. And maybe the hardest part is knowing you'll do it again tomorrow. That you'll find another way to delay. Another excuse, another 5 minutes. Because even now, as you feel this, as you hear this, you still don't know how to move. This isn't burnout. This is vanishing in slow motion. And the worst part is, you got so good at hiding it, you started hiding it from yourself. Maybe it wasn't fear. Maybe it was just not knowing how to begin without already knowing how it ends. You weren't frozen. You were stalling for a version of yourself that never showed up. And somewhere in the quiet, you forgot how to tell the difference between waiting and disappearing. You got so good at preparing that starting felt violent. You thought the delay kept you safe, but it also kept you out of reach. How long have you been surviving by convincing yourself it's not time yet? How much of your strength was just holding the doubt a little longer than anyone else could see? It wasn't laziness. It was you trying to be perfect before you even got the chance to be real. What if you weren't supposed to earn it first? What if showing up messy was the only way you ever belonged to it at all? What would happen if you let something begin before it was certain? What would happen if you didn't fix it? Just stayed. You don't have to figure it all out. Just don't disappear mid-thought.